Hello and welcome to our webinar on food safety, nutrition and hydration. This webinar is based on the NVQ course that we use to train our professional home care staff. We've made some changes to it to deliver to you as informal carers looking after a loved one at home. We do hope that you'll find it useful. We've taken out much of the information on legislation around food safety because we do not think that this is necessary or useful to you. However, you can download the slides for this webinar from our website, and we've made sure to include links to the legislation for those of you who might find it interesting or just want to know more. So, let's get started. The aims of this webinar are simple. Firstly, we want to provide you with the information you need to be able to handle and prepare food safely for the person you care for. And secondly, we want to provide you with some underpinning knowledge about the dietary requirements of the person that you care for. Although I hasten to add that this is general information rather than specific, and if the person you care for has particular needs, it's really important to discuss these with a dietitian, a nutritionist, and/or your general practitioner. What do we hope you will have learned by the end of this webinar? Well, not all of the things on this list for sure. As I said at the beginning, this webinar is based on the course we provide for professional home care workers. So we won't be covering everything. What we will be covering is maintaining safety and hygiene, how to store food safely, understanding measures that are needed to prevent food poisoning, understanding a balanced diet, and taking a person-centered approach to diet and nutrition. We hope you will find it useful. So, on to food safety. For people working in this area, there are significant costs to poor food handling techniques, but few of these are relevant to you as an informal carer at home. What is relevant is the first issue, food poisoning, which we all know can lead to significant illness. Food poisoning is caused by eating food which has been contaminated by bacteria that can be found on living food or by harmful substances. I think that we're all probably aware of the symptoms of food poisoning. They include vomiting, diarrhea, stomach pain, nausea, and dehydration, but they can also be much more serious. When it comes to preparation of food, hands are constantly in contact with various types of food, and they are our biggest area of concern in relation to personal hygiene. One of the best ways in which we can help protect the people we care for from food poisoning is through the simple process of washing our hands properly and on a regular basis. Since the COVID-19 crisis, many of us have got used to washing our hands more thoroughly and more regularly than ever before. There are many videos now available which show proper hand washing technique, and we've included some in the downloads available on our website. There are many food safety hazards, and in this slide we have listed them for you. Some might seem obvious, probably some are less so, but let's look at the next slide so we can see some of those hazards in an illustration. If this course was happening in a classroom, we would ask you to shout out now and tell us about the hazards you can see on this slide. As it is a webinar, we're going to have to list them for you. Here you can see the places and things that might introduce harmful bacteria. Now, while this might not be a picture of a typical kitchen, I'm sure that we all recognise some of the images from our own or other kitchens we've been in. It's really important to identify the sources of bacteria so that we can start to eliminate them where we can. Just a little about pests. We can define pests as any living creature that is capable of contaminating food directly or indirectly. These can include rodents, cockroaches, flies, birds, or other insects. They carry bacteria on their legs and contaminate food by walking on it, so it's important that we eliminate these as a potential source of contamination where we can. Now I want to say something about temperature control. What you can see on this slide are the ideal temperatures for a number of things. The one I want to draw your particular attention to is the cooked reheated temperature. Cooking and reheating at 75 degrees is essential to ensure there is no surviving bacteria. Why not use a cooking thermometer if you're unsure about this, as it's always better to be safe than sorry. These are available quite cheaply online or from many food shops. Now, onto food storage. Chilled storage, we're talking about your fridge here. There are a few things to remember about your fridge. The chilled temperature in your fridge means that the growth of bacteria is slowed rather than stopped. You always need to be aware of potential cross-contamination, especially if you are keeping raw meat, vegetables and cooked food together. Make sure that they are not mixed up. Try and make sure that your food is covered and the fridge is kept clean. Also try not to overload the fridge, as this stops the cold air from circulating and can lower the temperature in your fridge. A good rule of thumb is to use the FIFO approach, or first in, first out, so that foods are not hanging around in your fridge for too long. It's also really important to keep an eye on the use by and the best before dates that are on your food. Now your freezer. Many of the same rules apply as for your fridge. And remember, in the freezer, the temperature simply ensures that any bacteria remains dormant. It does not kill them. If you buy or get frozen food delivered, make sure it's still frozen when you put it into the freezer. If it's defrosted, then you should not refreeze it. What about your food cupboards or larder? Ideally, it should be dry, cool, well ventilated and easy to clean. As with your fridge and freezer, it's a good idea to follow the FIFO, first in, first out rule, and to keep a close eye on the use by and best by dates. Now we're going to look at nutrition and hydration in a little bit more detail. This slide shows the digestive system and looks at the time it takes, on average, for food to pass through the system and get broken down into the fuel that the body needs. When we talk about calories, this refers to how much energy your diet can provide for the body. A well-balanced diet is one that delivers an adequate amount of calories while at the same time providing the maximum amount of nutrients. Your body, through the digestive system, simply breaks down food molecules to release the energy that is stored within them. That energy is needed for all of our vital functions, everything from movement, thought and growth. Anything that you do requires fuel. The body stores energy that it does not need in the form of fat cells for future use. You may have heard of the term that is used to describe the process of breaking down food for use of energy. It's called metabolism. Increased activity leads to increased metabolism, but it's important to remember that the opposite is also true. With decreased activity, the body continues to store energy but does not use it in the day. As a result, weight gain can come from an increased intake of food, decreased activity, or indeed both. As I'm sure that most of you know, you can see the number of calories in a food by looking at the nutrition labels on food packaging. So, what about the effects of poor nutrition? Unfortunately, there are many, and here's just a list of some. Poor nutrition can lead to reduced muscle and tissue mass, decreased mobility and stamina, breathing difficulties, and an increased risk of chest infection or respiratory failure, wounds that take longer to heal, and illnesses that take longer to recover from. A slower immune response, which again increases the risk of getting infections and means it takes longer to recover from that infection that you do get. You may also have a difficulty staying warm as a result of having less muscle and tissue mass, increasing the risk of hypothermia, which is the inability to maintain a normal body temperature. People are at risk of becoming malnourished if they've eaten very little or nothing for more than 5 days, and it looks as though that might continue. Malnutrition is a serious problem in the UK. Our elderly population is increasing, and poor nutritional intake is a problem with people living both independently and in care and nursing homes and in hospital. But it's not just the elderly who are at risk of poor nutrition. Others at risk include those people who have just been discharged from hospital, people who are consuming a non-balanced diet, people with cancer or other long-term conditions, people whose diets consist of an excess of some foods, especially things such as fats and sugars, and also people recovering from surgery. So looking at those, we can see that the effects of poor nutrition can be very serious indeed. But what about dehydration? This list of problems that can be caused by dehydration really points to the importance of making sure that people are well hydrated and have enough to drink. Some of these you all know and may seem obvious, such as headaches and tiredness. Others you may not have heard of. Things like confusion and being prone to falls are things that we often worry about, but also often do not think that they may be being caused by something as simple as dehydration. Hydration is a vital part of our diet. It aids the digestive system and promotes good health and well-being. This is why it's recommended that everyone keeps topped up with between 6 and 8 medium glasses of water every day. Ask yourself, how many glasses of water have you drunk today? Dehydration is a major cause of hospitalisation amongst the elderly in the UK. Older people are more susceptible to dehydration due to less fluid content in their body. It's around 10% less than in an average adult body. There are also physiological changes associated with aging, like a reduced sense of thirst and a loss of appetite that can trigger dehydration in the elderly. Some dehydration can also be a result of the side effects of medication. Some examples are people who are taking diuretics or laxatives. Very often, the signs of dehydration are mild and vague and can be more or less similar to dementias or Alzheimer's symptoms. It's really important to be aware of the symptoms and ask yourself, is the person you care for simply dehydrated? Now we come to a subject that's a little bit more difficult. How do you resolve difficulties around eating with the person that you care for? Unfortunately, we cannot do this as a group exercise, so I'm going to have to go through them as a list. Remember, you do not have to take notes, as these slides are available to download from our website. So, what can you do? You can make the food look and smell appealing. You can provide food that the person likes. Try not to overload their plate with too much food. Small and regular portions often work best. Try different types of food. For example, finger food, milkshakes, or smoothies if you're trying to encourage more fruit and vegetables. Do not withhold desserts if the person hasn't eaten their savoury meal. They may prefer the taste of dessert. If food goes cold, it will lose its appeal. It can help to serve half portions to keep food warm, or to use the microwave to reheat that food. If the person is having difficulties chewing or swallowing, try naturally soft food such as scrambled eggs or stewed apple in the first instance, before considering pureeing the food. Also, mashing food with a fork is another option to consider before you go for the puree. Look for opportunities to encourage the person to eat. For instance, if the person is awake for much of the night, then nighttime snacks might be a good idea. Don't force someone to eat as a set meal time. They may not be hungry then. Regular snacks or small meals may suit the individual better. Encourage the person to get involved at meal times. For instance, they could help prepare the food or lay the table. Ensure that the person is wearing their correct glasses. It may be that they just can't see the food that well. Provide cutlery that's suitable for the individual, like those with larger handles or softer grip handles. When you're thinking about preparing a meal, this handy resource, the Eat Well plate, can offer you some guidance on balancing a meal. It's divided into sections which act as a guide to how much of each food group you should be eating. There is a downloadable picture of this plate on our website. If you would like to use it at home, you can always stick it up on the fridge as a reminder to you. The key, of course, is a balanced diet. You must have carbohydrates, you must have protein, fat, vitamins, minerals and fibre, and you need them in the correct proportions. For instance, if you do not have enough protein in your diet, you will not be able to grow or repair yourself, and things like wounds will take longer to heal properly. If you do not have enough energy-containing foods, you will feel very tired. If you have too much energy-containing foods, you'll become overweight. Just a little word about salt. A balanced diet will have sufficient salt in it to meet your needs. Too much salt can cause high blood pressure and other issues, so it's worth thinking about it before you add any to the food that you're preparing. In general, though, there are some basic tips to make sure that you and the person you care for eats well and stays well. If you follow these, you cannot go far wrong. Base your meals on starchy foods. Eat lots of fruit and vegetables. Eat more oily fish. Get active and try and maintain a healthy weight. Try to eat less salt, no more than 6 grams a day. Drink plenty of water, 6 to 8 glasses a day. Cut down on saturated fats and sugar, and do not skip breakfast when you can. Finally, as we come towards the end of this webinar, I want to say something about the things that could impact on the nutrition and hydration of the person you care for. Every person is an individual, so this will be different for all, but it's worth bearing in mind the following. The age of the person, the amount of daily activity that they do, any medical conditions that they have, their capacity, for instance, if they have dementia or a learning difficulty. any medications that they might be taking, the climate, or indeed the weather on the day. Is it very hot, for instance? Their changing choices, and even the time of day. It's also important to remember that a sensory impairment can lead to a reduction in appetite. For instance, if someone has lost or is losing their sense of taste or smell, they might be less inclined to eat. If they have oral or dental problems, they might find it difficult to chew or swallow, and it's important to take that into account when preparing food. It's also incredibly important to take into account the person's dignity and their choices. And so finally, we have a checklist which we hope will help you in supporting good nutrition and hydration in the person that you care for. Firstly, remember hygiene in the preparation and handling of food. Secondly, make sure the food is at the right temperature. Thirdly, think about the texture of the food. Fourthly, think about the appearance of the food. What does it look like? Next, think about the consistency of the food and portion size. Give a choice of where to eat. Think about the table layout. Are things readily to hand? If the person you care for has eating or swallowing difficulties, think about the position that they are in. Make sure that a drink is available. Use special utensils if required. Make it a time to enjoy. Eat together if you can. We hope that you found this webinar useful. It's part of a series of lunchtime learning webinars that we are running to support informal carers in what they do. Thank you for joining us today. If we can be of any further help to you, please contact us. The details of how to get in contact with us are on our website, which is at www.barnettcarers.org. We're here for you.